My name is Neeraj Chor. I'm the CEO of Bangladesh Angels, and welcome to our first ever physical fireside. So really excited, and thanks for coming here in the middle of the rain. I know it's not always easy in Dhaka, so really appreciate it. To introduce, ShopUp is one of the most important startups from Bangladesh. They are digitizing the retail value chain through a suite of solutions in logistics, inventory, and finance, with a mission to put 4.5 million small retailers in the driving seat of the country's economic growth. They've raised almost $200 million so far in a series of venture capital and angel rounds. Bangladesh Angels today is proud to co-host our first ever in-person fireside chat with Mr. Shaheen Siam, the founding member and chief strategy officer at ShopUp. Welcome, Shaheen Bhai.
Thank you.
And Ataur Rahim Chowdhury, co-founder and chief product officer at ShopUp's HQ in Dhaka. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, please join us, along with founders and angels from the community, for a lively discussion and networking session. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Nijay. And I'm really glad everyone made this journey to the ShopUp offices through the rain and the roads that we have today. And we are extremely proud to host you at our offices. And let's try to make this as casual as possible, as interactive as possible. We would love to obviously share our journey with everyone and share as much as we have learned throughout this journey with everyone, but also we would love to hear from you guys as well. So any way we can make this as interactive as possible.
So whatever Siam said, and yeah, I would like to hear more from probably founders, and yeah, that's it.
Awesome. So today's session, we'll kind of try to make it as interactive as possible. So we'll start on kind of 3 phases of ShopUp's journey. You've seen that on the big timeline when you walked in here. So starting up, scaling, and growth. And within each section, we'll try to kind of take a little bit of a break. And depending on who the entrepreneur is in the room, I see some scaling entrepreneurs, I see some startup entrepreneurs, I see some maybe ideation stage entrepreneurs as well. Maybe get your thoughts, get your experience in this, and we can have a discussion as well. Awesome. Thank you so much. So we always like to start with this question whenever we do fireside. So we'd love to hear more about your individual stories. You know, where did you grow up, and when you were growing up, what did you aspire to be?
Sure, I'll start. So I grew up mostly in Bangladesh. Yes, for a short stint, I was outside of Bangladesh. Mainly, I grew up in around Southeast Asia, China, and places like that. But from class 8 onwards, I was mostly in Bangladesh. So we never obviously envisioned what we would do post-graduation, right? So me, Afif, and some of our friends, we were in the same university. And we kind of started doing something from the 3rd year of university, right? Like we just got together and we started doing something. So ShopUp wasn't our first startup. We actually started, like me, Afif, and a few other friends, we started with something called Maverick Studios. It's a very early, I would say, an animation and video editing studio that we used to do. And then from there, we kind of slowly got into other things. We built a mini incubator. Ataur came on board, joined us at that time to lead the tech teams. And from that mini incubator, we have things like Olik, which is currently running its own thing, and ShopUp, where me, Ata, Afif, and Sifat was also involved. So we graduated in around 2012. We were involved in a few startups from then on, but we started ShopUp, I think, in 2016. So by that time, we already had experience building 3 startups. And I think that also helped when we started this journey of ShopUp and how we wanted to approach it. Ata.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in Dhaka mostly. I don't think before joining with you guys, I did not go to any other country before, like when we first went to Nepal, right? So and for me, I was supposed to do PhD and all. I was studying computer science, but I think during 2012 or 2011, I think I joined on one of their ventures and started. So I was student as well, like figuring. They were also student. Like we were figuring out like the first products, how to build those products. Like from there on, I remember, let's say. At one point, like we had one glass window in our kitchen, right? We were writing what we want to do. So Olik was one of them. I think X was another. ShopUp was probably second to last. Like there were like six things that we wanted to do. ShopUp was one of them. So funny story, like before starting ShopUp, like officially, me and Afif, I think we did a small experiment back in 2013 where, let's say, I coded, let's say, Shopify kind of like a thing. Like you can drag and drop and build a store and kind of launch it. Like that never panned out, but the idea of, let's say, the 5 things that we wanted to do, 5 or 6 things, like that was there. So like kind of from there, like finally ShopUp happened, like after 2-3 years after that. Yeah.
So when we talk about, by the way, when we talk about the early stages, I think you'll see we're talking about a completely different company than what you see in front of you. Like there has been so many iterations, so many pivots to what we do today, and I'm pretty sure many of you may also not know what we do today. So we'll obviously give that clarity. And but what Ata talked about building the product of the first product that we did. I don't think it still exists anymore. It has. We have had so many iterations since then, and I think as we go more into that, we can also focus on how those were necessary, and how quickly we had to do them to get to where we are today. Otherwise, I don't think that journey would be the same.
I think there's 2 things that stand out from that kind of first kind of introduction, right? So one is that kind of old adage that it takes many years to build an overnight success, right? And so it takes many. I mean, whatever you're doing at the moment isn't necessarily what will take you there. And second, it sounds like you guys had the first startup studio, or at least an entrepreneurship studio in Dhaka. So that's quite cool because I know Olik is still there, and a few other companies came out of that. It's still there. So there's definitely a ShopUp mafia, even before the ShopUp became what it is now. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, let's go into that startup phase, right? And when ShopUp really came into the scene, and we started hearing about the company, and we started learning about the company this around, let's say for me, even it was like 16, 17. I guess the original idea was, or what people knew you guys, or were introduced to you guys as, it was something that was enabling Facebook commerce for these micro merchants, looking at kind of the messenger-based cart systems and micro loans. I mean, was that the original idea for ShopUp? And maybe if you can explain, how did you test that idea and get going in the market?
Sure. So let me give you an idea of what the first product was. And then you're very right. So if you look at startups during that time, like 2014 onwards, they coincide with the technological wave that happened in Bangladesh, right? The adoption of technology, Bcash doing going mass market and a lot of things. And a lot of startups during that time rode that wave of technology. And back then, F-commerce or social commerce that we say was more prevalent than e-commerce, right? And that had a very good trajectory. And that's why we built our first product based around Facebook commerce. So that's basically was our intended target. The intended market was around the people who would sell their wares through Facebook, right? So that was the first product that we had. Initially, that was it. There were no microloans. There were no deliveries. We were using third-party logistics. So the first product we had was built around that. And yeah, so when we the first thing that we did was try to get some traction, and we approached some angel investors with that. And initially, when we approached a lot of them, this was still the product that we had. We were approaching angels with this particular model of building around the Facebook commerce. And obviously, maybe I'll go more into that later, but it from 2016 to now, we did have a lot of rejections, right? Like initially, we started by bootstrapping from our previous startups. So that's how we got the initial capital. We saved from our previous startups, and we started doing ShopUp. And when we started running out of money, uh, we every startup that I do, we always have that conversation about contemplating shutdown, right? Like, should we shut down or should we continue and everything? So the angel investment that we initially reached out to, we were getting rejections left and right, but that is still something that we continued to until we got that first angel, and that too from Bangladesh itself, to at least give us some runway into going and more. That's when it helped us iterate. It helped us go to the next level. Yeah.
Yeah, so to add with that, so I'll probably go a bit about how we actually started. So the product itself, right? So first, like we were doing a lot of things, like wanted to really understand whether Facebook merchants or Facebook customer would really use a product like this or not, right? That was probably the first validation we kind of needed to get. So what we did, we created a product called Smart Hash. So what this product did was enable Facebook merchant to create some hashtags or keywords, and they could enable that in their Facebook page. What would happen is if someone kind of mentioned that keyword, they will automatically get a notification in the Smart Hash app. So so we deployed that app, I think within 1 week, ideation to actually development, and released it as soon as possible. After that, I think we got around 5,000-ish response back then. Not just from Bangladesh, from few other places as well. But that was like kind of the first thing that we validated, that, okay, the Facebook merchant base is existing, and they are willing to use some sort of product. So after that, actually, we started to kind of not iterate, rather we wanted to build a proper product. Like we called it ShopUp Lite, and launched ShopUp Lite after, I think, after one or 2 months after that. Yeah.
Got it. And I'm curious, from you were talking about kind of going to angel investors. We started our journey at the end of 2018. You guys were trying to raise money in 16. What was the angel landscape like? When people rejected you, what did they say? What was the common refrain?
Yeah. So obviously, you guys can imagine it was very different, right? The angel landscape was very different. So just a little background, even for the previous startups, we did raise some angel investments locally, but back then, and I'm sure it's still relevant now, but they had that sort of a mindset where they would want a large part of the company and expect returns as soon as possible, right? That was still the very initial responses that we were getting. And then as we, I think, navigated towards more relevant angels, I think two feedback that we got very often was, number one, obviously the market size, right? Like, was Bangladesh ready for this tech-enabled Facebook platform, selling platform, right? And the second was, obviously, is the problem acute enough for us to solve? So these two feedback is something that we got very early on. And I'm talking mostly about angels in Bangladesh, right? So those were, I think they made sense, right? Like, for example, it's just coming in, technology is coming in, and we're trying to bring a product to the market which will be riding on this wave of technology. And the idea, maybe if you cannot show them a proper market size, the question will always be there, is the market big enough? And also, are people selling enough, or are there enough merchants that, are you solving the problem that is acute enough for them to use this platform? And then these two, they made sense, obviously, but I think they were obviously a bit more basic in terms of the understanding as well. So maybe later when we talk about where ShopUp is at right now, maybe it also helps to understand that although the problem or the target market at that time was pretty small, the problem they were facing was much more acute by the offline retailers than the online retailers, which we later got into, right? So if you understood the problem, then you would understand that it's not just, you're not solving for just a small portion of the market. The opportunity is there to solve it for the larger portion of the market, which we later moved into as well. So I think that was a pretty early learning that we got when going through this journey.
It sounds like, I mean, they were kind of pushing back on the TAM, the total addressable market.
They were, and I think in many cases, and once again, that's the learning that I got as well during that time, is it's not just what you're solving for at that moment of time. Like the TAM that we identified was small, but the problem was shared among a larger TAM. So maybe we did not identify it at that moment, but we eventually learned that it's not just a very small problem that we were trying to solve. It was a much larger problem that we were trying to solve, which is basically sourcing by retailers. So we'll probably go into that more details later.
Because I guess at that time, both based on the number of Facebook merchants, but also the amount of transactions they were doing, maybe that would be a limiting factor to certain types of investors. Also curious, because a lot of founders, I'm sure, I mean, the weird thing about the Bangladesh market is there's a lot of convergence between the development sector and the startup sector. And I know you guys also relied on a few grants in the beginning with a few pilots like MetLife and BFPB and others. I mean, being honest, did those help you or did they distract?
They helped. Yes, they helped. They definitely helped. So I think one thing I would want to mention is we got a grant from the Bill and Gates Millionaire Foundation. So that grant enabled us to study the microloans that you talked about initially. Through that grant, we were able to identify at least two models that did not work. So eventually we were able to move to a model that did work. So I think that enabled us to go to market, to study how loans were working, to study how we can disburse loans and how they were being collected. We did a lot of, at least a lot of models with that fund itself, and we eventually figured out what was the right way to go about it.
Yeah, just to add, like it comes with a lot of para. So if there are options like equity and probably grant, I would personally go with probably equity. But yeah, I think.
So that's the founders talking. So I would go with grant because I don't want to give up more equity. But anyways,
so it creates a lot of distraction. Like not all of them. I think Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was really helpful, but some of the others we had to put on a lot of work, but which did not really contribute to actual growth of the company. But we kind of had to do. But yeah. Ultimately, it gave us extra runway, so obviously that's helpful.
No, and I definitely want to, because that was when I first had become aware of ShopUp. I remember Saif Kamal at Toru, and he had talked about you guys, about how you're facilitating digitization of these merchants, and you were helping them get loans as well. So for a product like that, I'm just curious, how did you go about kind of building it, and how did you then kind of build in the feedback loop for the customer?
Yeah, for us, like it's always been understanding the customer. Like every startup or company who has grown needs to understand their customer and solve their pain point. Like we started with the e-commerce or F-commerce platform for small merchant, but eventually we while doing that we got to understand what is their real pain point. Like for instance, we saw that merchants are not really growing, and what's the primary reason for that. One of the core reason was they don't have capital to reinvest. Their money is getting stuck with courier companies. Like how do we solve this problem, right? From there, basically the idea of giving them the loan that came in. Like when we give them loan, after that they have like other problems, like delivery is a problem. Like everything got iterated from customer problem itself.
And so was that one of the reasons behind creating RedX?
Correct. Yeah. So what we saw, like we were aggregating small merchants all over the country, but what really ended up happening, like we'll be giving the parcels to courier companies, but these small merchants would not really be treated as, let's say, e-commerce, like Ajker Dil back then, probably Kemu, Daraj, all of those. Like they would be always on the lower priority side. So let's say a customer problem would be coming, and we would be waiting for days to get answer from the courier companies, like what happened with that parcel. So out of frustration, we actually had to do that. And obviously, at that time, we have raised enough capital to actually pull this off.
So I think if you look at the logistics scene right now, it's a lot more matured than it was in 2017, right? Like the e-commerce deliveries and stuff. Back then, deliveries would take a lot of time. There was getting the cash back from the customer would take even more time going through the proper channels and everything. So while we did build that first platform as our first product, everything that came after that was us trying to solve a pain point. Was us trying to solve a pain point for the merchant. So we built that platform. The merchant used it to sell their products, and now they were complaining about how long it took to get the products to those doorstep, how long it took for them to get the money back, and how they were not being able to grow because they did not have access to capital. I think those were the points where we were trying to actively solve them. Initially, we launched a captive logistics network called ShopUp Express. So by captive, it means we are only doing ShopUp deliveries. That eventually led to the birth of RedX as a delivery network, which is not just for ShopUp, but for all other merchants as well.
But when you say shop up deliveries, who were you delivering to?
The customers of the merchants on our platform. So we were initially only delivering to them, but by that time, so we wanted this service to be pan Bangladesh, right? Like across Bangladesh, we wanted everyone to get the same service. Now, we had to invest behind that infrastructure. We had to invest behind that logistics infrastructure across Bangladesh. And we did that in 2 months, like mainly because we had to complete that before the shutdown started. And this is, I'm talking about 2020, early 2020. I still remember the COVID shutdown started from 24th March 2020. In January, first week, we decided that we'll probably launch RedX Pan Bangladesh. We didn't know a shutdown was coming, obviously. We had a long time in mind. But when we realized that a shutdown was coming, we had to quickly accelerate and have that infrastructure ready. And that's why we have RedX right now.
We launched the platform in March. I think lockdown started to happen from 26th of March. So so we tried a lot of things, but ultimately it's I think our delivery agents and hub managers actually who pulled that off back then. Right, within 2 weeks, we were pan Bangladesh, and I think within 4 weeks, we are the leader in terms of number of deliveries we do.
That's insane. The level of execution required to get there. I'm just trying to finish up the starting up phase of your journey, and one could say that ended officially towards the end of 2018, because I remember you had raised the 1.6 million from Media and these impact investors. It was still the largest seed, I think, in Bangladesh, 1.6 million. And I remember because we had just launched Bangladesh Angels, so I was really excited, like, oh, another company I could talk about at that time, but I didn't know you guys as well. But was that when the pivot was already happening towards offline merchants?
That was earlier. The offline happened, I think, later, during our pre-Series A round. So there's a funny story about the angels. So a lot of times we get this question from founders is, how many angels should you have in the cap table, right? Like how many is too much or anything? And I've seen like where 7, 8 angels was also considered too much by a lot of people. We had like 25 angels in our cap table. So imagine the administrative nightmare. And these 25 people would be all across the world, right? So during closing, I had created this Excel file of each person's working hours, non-working hours. So when is the right time to reach out to them for them to sign something? So initially it was an administrative nightmare, but everyone played a role, right? Everyone played a role, and the advice that I usually give is not how many, it's who is on the cap table, right? You can have a lot of people on the cap table, but they need to be contributing to something, right? And that I think helped us a lot. The 25 angels didn't happen overnight. As I said, we were at a stage where we were running out of money. And just the funny story is like the one that Afif going to the airport. So basically, uh, this was before surge. So basically, if you guys have already raised some money, you would know that the hardest is to raise the first one, right? Once the first one is done, the others kind of become easier. So once again, we were like struggling with our first angel, locking our first angel money, right? And this is outside of Bangladesh. So Afif was meeting this person, and he was hopeful that he would lock that money and get that check from him that time in Singapore. The meeting went well, everything went fine. And then the angel said that, you know what? I'm going to the US tomorrow. Let me come back, and then we can finish everything and talk about it. So that means basically it's not a yes. And if it's not a yes, it doesn't matter if it's a no or a maybe or whatever. It has to be a yes. And at that time, we were already out of funds, running out of money and everything. So what Afif did is he found out, so he remembered he said he's going to the US tomorrow. So he found out all the flights that travel from Singapore to US during that day. He went to the airport and he was just walking around, like he was showing that he was about to get a flight and everything. And he coincidentally bumped into the guy who said that he'll be traveling to US tomorrow. And during that time, Afif obviously once again had that conversation. He had papers ready and everything that, you know what, let's just close it right now and get it over with. So even though he did not close at that point, that person went to the US, immediately called back Afif and said that, you know, like he really admired that grit that he showed in trying to close. And not only did he invest immediately after, it's the connections that he made that I'm referring you to my friends. And that opened up an entire world of angel investor, which eventually led to the 1.6 Omidyar seed. So that was basically the end of our angel round. I think. So yeah, the advice I have is that closing grit, like don't leave it to fate, right? Oh, Ashbeabar, then we can talk. That you need to close, and we had this target of closing within 48 hours. If you feel that you can close 48 hours, just close it. Beyond that, chula jai. So you really need to close.
So this applies to everything actually, like hiring as well. Like if you kind of keep a position open, you have spoke to someone and you did not close, he will find some other opportunity, especially like if you are hiring engineers or PMs, right? So good candidates are very hard to find. And when you find them, you have to close them as soon as possible.
You have to close. You have to close.
You have to close within 48 hours. That's a must.
That's awesome. No, I love that. And I think that was circulating as well. And I know there's somebody in the audience, but we were catching up a couple of nights ago and, learned also from her about, even though some people rejected them, they liked them enough that they kept on introducing them, which opened up to other people. So even one lead that doesn't quite close can lead to something else if you approach it in the right way. And in this case, Afif definitely did, and the person appreciated it. So we'll stop here for now. We'll take a little bit of a break. So ShopUp is kind of towards the end of its startup phase. Now it's getting to be the ShopUp that we've all come to know. Let's take a break. Let's hear from anybody in the audience. I think we've got some mics here. We'll take a few questions. Let's focus on the startup phase because we'll talk about the growth phase coming up. So let's talk, if anybody has any questions about the startup phase of both ShopUp, but also maybe if they're seeking some advice, maybe they're a new entrepreneur.
So we have mics as well. So if anyone wants to talk, I think we'll have the mic delivered to them.
Anybody have any questions? Saimapu. And if you can introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Saima. I'm also an investor with BAN. So I just wanted to know what happened to the 25 angel investors that you had. Are they still there or they have exited with a lot of money?
So during Series B, which we closed around like less than a year back, most of them got an exit. Most of them got an exit. So it's a funny story. Just one additional story to that. So our first angel, he only did one investment, and that was us, right? And that person got like a 50x return on the initial investment. And then suddenly he became well known among his friends and peers that, all right, so he made an investment. And they went to him for advice that, what did you do? What did you look at? Like, what did you look at when making the investment? What are the investment decisions that you took? So he said a lot of things to them. I looked at the model. I believed in the like what we'll go through and everything. And after that, he came to our office. He sat with me and Afif and said, Ashok, can you tell me what you guys do? Like, so that when people ask me what ShopUp does, I can tell them what it is. So I asked him that, all right, why did you invest in us? The question was simple. I didn't invest behind ShopUp, I invested behind you two, or the entire team, right? Like, they invested on the founders. At that point, he did not have much to go on. Like, there wasn't really a lot of things. So those extremely early seed level angels, they invest in the founders itself, not just the model, and they like the business idea and stuff like that.
Just to add, so he is actually truly an angel for us. Like the amount of support we have gotten from him is extraordinary, and from probably the other 25 as well, 24. I think like each helped with different things. Like some of them introduced us to Facebook development team, some of them with Google marketing team. Like each helped in their own regards, and obviously funding is one thing, but every time we kind of need to we need some help, like we can actually reach out to them still and figure out like some connections, right?
Most of them took an exit during Series B. So which usually happens when a large VC comes in and wants to clean up the cap table during that time.
But I mean, that's a lesson for angels, right? Is you have to be ready to help, and also for founders, take advantage of your angels, right, and get help from them. I think there was another question. I think Ataur, no, behind, yeah, go ahead. Introduce yourself, and then.
Hi, my name is Tanvir. I'm also an entrepreneur. So I have the question, like, where did this original idea came from? Like, what was the pain point that kind of triggered it? Hey, this needs to be solved. So that's my question.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, first is like we already had an ambition that we wanted to do something like that. That was back in 2012, 13. Like said, like we wrote in a board that we wanted to do something like that. So, but the market was kind of not ready at that point. So in 2014 and early 15, so we were working on one platform called Smashboard. So which was for telco, like it was a social media query resolution tool. Robi, GP, everybody kind of was using that tool back then. So from there, we first actually interacted with social media customer and was seeing the behavior that people are actually doing, and purchase started to happen back then. So after that, we tried a couple of things, and finally, I think end of 2015, by then we are sure that we wanted to do in this space. Like both the previous idea and now that we actually are seeing result, both of them kind of were connected, and we started to see that.
Yeah. So I don't think it was a singular idea, right? I don't think we had like single idea, this is what we'll do. As Atta said, it was like a journey over time. Like we started with Smashboard, which is a small thing. When we did that, we realized we can do this as well. We can solve this problem, that problem, and I think it's like it's an ongoing thing. Even right now, maybe we are not at that point where we should be. Right? Right now, we're also coming up against problems that we're trying to solve. So it's like it's not a singular idea, but a series of ideas.
Like, did any outside startup like Shopify inspired you guys? Like,
I don't think it was inspired, but rather more like.
Yeah, I think actually, so the original 2013 idea really came from Afif. Like Afif hometown, he went there and he saw that there are merchants who are building things and can sell if they're given opportunity, right? So from there we wanted to build one tool, and Afif actually tried to make them use Shopify back then, but it did not really work out. So from there we had this idea. Actually, Afif put in the board from there. After that, a lot of iteration, after a lot of things, a lot of time went by, and we finally came to this.
Thank
So
you.
when we tried to solve that problem, Shopify was one of the solutions, which we tried to use to help these merchants, and then we realized that they need more, I think, localized
More services
solutions
and
and stuff
features.
like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Shakib had a question.
Hi everyone, hi Nirjar. Hi Shaheen bhai and Ataur bhai. Thank you everyone for coming. Wonderful event so far. So I'm Shakib. I'm a bridge builder between business and tech. Recently returned back to Bangladesh. My question, very inspiring story so far. My question, I have a couple of questions. The first one is the initial startup that you guys worked on and scaled. What lessons did you take from that when you were iterating the first version of ShopUp? And the second question is, how did the Gates Foundation grant come about? That must have been a very challenging process. So very curious to learn about how it come about as well. Thank you.
So just the first part take to our women head, I think.
The first part was what lessons did you take from the initial startup that you guys worked on
Got it.
and applied that in like ShopUp?
Got it. So I think one of the things that I personally took was the importance of taking decisions quickly, right? Like if you feel you need to iterate, you need to do it just now. Like we cannot have enough time, or we cannot invest enough time behind decisions usually at that early stage. And the second part, which complements this, is even if you do not have 100% of the information needed to take that decision, I think even 60 to 65% giving you conviction, just go for it. I think that's what we took from that learnings from our early startups, which were, for example, to give you an example, where I think we have identified several times that maybe this is not the right product, maybe we need to iterate or go towards a new target market, but still we tried it one more time or another time until we had that thing. But what did that do? That took obviously runway. We had a bigger burn. It also took our efforts and everything. But I think what eventually helped with those in ShopUp is we had those decision making times reduced, right? Like we had that, if we needed to do something, we allocated like the least amount of time that we needed to execute and go forward. I think that's what we took from our earlier learnings. And the second one is about the Gates Foundation, right? So yes, definitely, I think the Gates Foundation was, it required a lot of effort. It required a lot of administrative work put behind this. But I think what we were trying to achieve that during that time aligned really well with the two of us, which is basically these nano loans to merchants. So I think Gates enabled us to go towards that path. Otherwise, for example, we would need capital. We would need a lot of partners as well. For example, BRAC, or not just the BRAC NGO, but also BRAC Bank and stuff like that, who were partners during that Gates Foundation period. These partnerships were enabled because we were doing a Gates Foundation project. Maybe it opened doors for us as like a small startup during that time would not be able to, right? So I think we really are grateful for that Gates Foundation, even though it took a lot of time, because it gave us that entry into that project as well as open doors. Yeah.
So just on that, so what made you reach out to them? Is it because of the familiarity with Bcash at the time, or what was the reasoning behind reaching out to them?
So I think this was also more, I won't call it entire happenstance, but also we were familiar with the program manager of Gates Foundation during that time. And I think she helped us through that process as well of understanding what sort of grant we need and what we would help us during this journey as well. So a lot of things were not thought out very methodically, obviously, but it's also about getting the right person, the right guidance towards that as well.
May I?
Yeah. So in terms of lesson, if I want to add, what I would say, like one thing, like moving fast from, so you should not really think about, let's say, sunk cost whenever you are really moving on, right? So you would kind of certain that this idea that you are kind of working on probably for last few weeks or few months is not working out, right? So when you kind of know that you need to operate in days or weeks, like you have to move as soon as possible and right on the and land on the next good idea that you have, right?
Thank you.
Excellent. I think we'll, keep moving to the next phase now, and I think let's talk a little bit more about scale and growth phase as well. So I think the scaling phase was really then 2019, 20 onwards, and what you guys are doing. One of the big things that happened that everybody in the ecosystem got excited about is you got into Sequoia's Surge program. You were, I think, part of the first cohort. What did Surge like about ShopUp and what it was doing?
Yeah, I think even now, I think Surge is all about basics, right? So they would really look into the basic numbers. Like for example, if I remember correctly, I spent a lot of time figuring out the retention cohorts and basically conversion numbers, DAOs. Back then, we were still a platform, right? Conversion, all of those things were very important back then. Like all of the usual basics of a product, right? So that's kind of work. And also hustle of Afif is another big part. Like for example, the similar thing chasing in the airport that happened in Sarj as well. Like uh, I think they denied us the first time, but we kind of accidentally met whoever is supposed to make the decision in the airport itself, and from there on, basically, more conversation happened, and actually
So
we
yeah,
closed
that's
it.
a common theme. Maybe the initial hustling theme is common. But one more thing that I also like to add is when the cohort started, Surge cohort started, I don't think anyone who was involved with that cohort or anyone who would even imagine a Bangladeshi startup being the first cohort, part of the first cohort, right? But one approach that we changed when we started approaching them is we would sell Bangladesh first, right? So we don't start with ShopUp. Like this was an approach that we initially took when we realized that uh, everyone kind of knew that Bangladesh was coming up and they were doing good and everything. They don't know the numbers. They don't know actually have that visualization of how much Bangladesh was growing and that's right. So I think we just changed our approach. We sold Bangladesh first, the Bangladesh success story, and with that came the ShopUp success story. So it's like come for the Bangladesh success story, stay for the ShopUp emerging story. I think that approach helped us in the initial stages where it gave them more tangible visualization of what this market is.
I'd love to learn more about that. When you say that, though, like what metrics did you focus on when selling the Bangladesh story first?
So some basic metrics, for example, the cost of data, the internet usage, how it's growing among the population. And I think the GDP obviously was one of them, and the purchasing power of the population as a whole, which meant the consumer market was expanding. And the cost, once again, if I remember, I think we had back in 2016 or 15, that data came out where Bangladesh or Dhaka was probably the second largest city in the world who was using Facebook, just behind Bangkok. And data like that helped create that market for us, right? And also how we were also one of the cheapest in terms of that data cost that they were using. So I think these sort of information, especially the one that the number of Facebook users in Bangladesh, that kind of really opened their eyes that yes, there is a market here. So I think that sort of data helped.
If you
Yeah.
got it, perfect. Another big milestone was the Vonik kind of acquisition or I guess integration. Why did it happen? Very unique as well, right? An Indian company and a Bangladeshi company coming together.
Yeah. So before Surge itself, I think Surge happened on March or April. Me and Afif were in Bangalore, I think in February or mid-March, like trying to recruit head of technology or head of engineers for our engineering team, also trying to create a small office there. So even then, basically, we were struggling to hire good engineers, and we needed a lot of them. The vision that we had, we needed a lot of engineers.
You can
So-
imagine that during that time, why would any engineer want to
Yeah.
work in
So
ShopUp?
Indian ecosystem was booming. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we wanted to create an office there. So one of the key reason why there, like I remember, like one time in November 2018, I think we took 100 interviews but could not hire one engineer in Bangladesh. So that was kind of triggering few things, and after that. We could not really hire on that journey on March. So after that, basically Surge happened, and through Surge, actually, and I think it was Kunal, right? Kunal introduced us to Vunik, and we were doing a partnership with Vunik back then for our reseller business, where Vunik was transporting product from Surat to Kolkata, and we were from Kolkata. Basically, we are getting product and selling to our resellers. So from there, we kind of knew them, and we got like excellent recommendation from people like the founders, especially Sujat, Navanit, are great. The teams were great. So what happened, like since we already have a partnership, and after Surge happened, we got good recommendation. We visited their office, and it kind of felt like home for me. Like the exactly how some of the principles that we followed felt like what they are also kind of following the same. So that kind of converted like the tech ambition was there, but mostly we really acquired the founders. So back then, I think that was the key part of Vunik merging. Than probably becoming the tech company. Right now, I see that the tech part is kind of the extra thing that we got, but mostly we have acquired the founders.
I think so. The two founders there were Sujat and Navanit. And just a little background on that, I think Sujat was product manager.
First product manager for Amazon India.
First product manager for Amazon India, right? And Navanit has also worked on a lot of Indian unicorns as well, which later became.
Navanit is part of 3 Indian unicorns. He was he was in the first teams of all of them, like Freshdesk, I think Zoho, and Aryata. I think 3 unicorn companies.
I think what clicked was the alignment in principle, but also the ambition between us and them. And I think that we realized that we wanted to achieve the same goals. So I think that made that decision easier. They came on board as founders, Sujat and Navanit. And now, as Ata said, like the tech hub is something that we still have in Bangalore, but it's much more integrated than it was right now, where we're using that technology to expand our services in Bangladesh.
It's quite eye-opening when you mentioned, you tried to interview 100 engineers and couldn't hire one. What was lacking in at that time, and is that still true today for you?
So I think one of the key reason was ShopUp was not a popular name back then. So the kind of candidates we are trying to recruit, they were not of that quality. I would not say Bangladesh doesn't have talent. Bangladesh is a very talented country, but somehow that did not click back then. So we still have a good number of engineering team here in Bangladesh, but back then it seemed necessary to expand there because it will because it's kind of a formula that other people also use, Indonesian startups or Singaporean startups. Since we are already, we have seen, let's say, Gojek or Grab having Indian offices and actually pull great successes in engineering delivery there.
So I think being a startup that just was post seed and pre series A, decisions like these, like acquisition of an Indian company and stuff like that's not easy. Like that's very scary. Like you've just raised money, now spend that money to buy this company, right? Like those are not easy decisions to make. But I think that was part of the mindset that Surge instilled into the founders is that these bold decisions are necessary. And if you have enough conviction, you should go for it. And that tech stack that Vunik prepared initially was very helpful in giving us quick successes, right? So otherwise, we would have to spend years building that tech stack and then go to that side. And also, it helped us to expand into more services as well. So I think that was one of the reasons that that merger happened.
And did you have to do much selling to the Vonik team? Hey, come on board and
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the founders had offer from Paytm and like a lot of other companies as well. So they are very well reputed among the industries. Navanit in engineering community, like right after acquiring them, we were able to hire probably 20 ex-Vunik engineers, like within a very short time. Like it's not, it does, 20 probably seems like small, but engineering terms, it's very hard to hire 20 engineers.
because I mean those are 10x people.
Yeah.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And also just curious, when the integration happened, was it still focused on Bangladesh as the kind of market to go after, or were you thinking about India as well?
It was always Bangladesh. I think so. Even now it's only the I think engineering and tech and some business level hirings that we have done in India, but the market was always intended to be Bangladesh right now.
Got it. Fast forward, we're in the middle of the pandemic. You launched RedX, and then I remember another big story was you raised one of the largest ever Series A's, or I think it still is, right? In Bangladesh, I think $22 million. Can you give us a sense of scale at that time? What did investors in that round? Because you brought a lot of new investors as well, like Prosus and others. What did they like about the company when that happened?
I think Prosus and the others came in during Series B. I think Series A, it was mostly led by Sequoia, Flourish, which is Amandiar, and Vion. So I think, so during that time, Series A, what we were able to do were two things. Number one, we showed that the pandemic did not just hamper us, it helped us. Like it helped a lot of adoption. It helped a lot of growth as well. But once that shutdown, lockdown started easing, our business did not go down as well. It kept on increasing. That is one of the convictions and one of the use cases that we were able to show. And at the same time, I think once again, going back to it, where we were able to showcase the Bangladesh success story. And if you, like, for example, kind of have an idea of what ShopUp does right now, is we are building that iron triangle of commerce, logistics, and financial services. That was a time when we were able to showcase that we are in the very early stages of the market where these can be built by us. And similarly, how Alibaba did it in China, right? So I think these two important factors played a lot in closing our Series A. But at the same time, I think it was the usual things, right? We had growth, we had a team where the Vunik team joined us, and we had that ambition of being there as soon as possible. I think that helped us a lot in closing our Series A. Vunik was the last one to come in. Vion was the last one to come in during that round, but I think they also they were not really a VC, but they were looking at partnerships that they can do in this market as well, since they are the owner of Banalink as well.
Yeah, just to add, not probably on Series A directly, but one thing that we did very well, like right after COVID, a lot of people kind of shut down their business or limited their scope of business, right? But from day one, I think even though there was COVID lockdown, but we gathered in like different part of our offices in warehouses or in basically small offices, right? Try to figure out what to do next. So at that time, the reseller business that we had actually was completely shut because there was no sourcing from India, and there was no and whatever we had in warehouse, there was no easy way to really manage them during COVID. So we had to iterate a lot. The lot of ideas came in. We probably iterated 8 or 9 ideas back then, and Redux is one, but 8, 9 ideas we executed and eliminated within weeks, right? So the fast execution part is very important. Like here, not just the operation team, tech, and business, even Afif, like everybody coming together and really iterating very quickly was very crucial. I think to add there, the execution during COVID was very important as well. And how that execution drove growth. So at that stage, like people actually look for execution, right? Series A and especially Series B, C, people would be looking for the teams who can execute really fast. So that was the first example of our execution. So I think that helped a lot as well.
Besides Redux, what else came out of that board, 8, 9, 10, that you might be able to tell us about?
Yeah, Mocam, right? So
That was, I would say, the official foray into the offline Mocam retailers, right? So, as you said, the reseller, which was the online part of it, that was more or less shut. But the physical retailers that we were serving right now, which we call Mocam, that kind of started during that time, the very early stages of the pandemic.
And for those who might not be as familiar, or those who might watch this after, could you now then explain the kind of the 3 main parts of the iron triangle? So there's Mocam, there's Redux, and there's also
Sure.
Baki as well.
Sure. So I think having talked about all the things we did previously, I think right now we can talk about what we do now, right? So what we are doing is we are building what is called the iron triangle of commerce. You have commerce, logistics, and financial services working in a flywheel, similar to how Alibaba did it in China, right? So what Mocam does, which is our commerce platform, is we work with what you would call Modi Dokans, small businesses. And what we do is we consolidated their sourcing. So if you imagine like any Modi Dokan, if they would want to purchase one particular SKU, they would need to go to that distributor, another SKU, that distributor, and everything. And what we have seen is even a small Modi Dokan would need to manage at least 30 different distribution channels to have that shop running. What made sense for us was to consolidate into one distribution channel. So this is basically the first part of Mocam that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So like Mocam solves our retailers' sourcing problem, and fundamentally Mocam is a distribution platform. So what we are trying to do is create the largest distribution platform for Bangladesh. So anybody, small or big, eventually the goal is like eventually they should be able to come and distribute their products, and it would be delivered to the doorstep of the retailer. So that's the goal of Mocam. Redex we already know. For both Mocam and other B2B merchants, we deliver doorstep. Key part of Mocam as well, like delivering through, let's say, truck from supplier to directly warehouse or to directly retailer premise. Redex is very crucial for Mocam as well, right? So on the other hand, if you kind of understand like these retailers, no one is giving them structured credit. So we know them, like our research goes to them every day. Our delivery guys goes to them every day. So we know which retailer is doing what business and what type of product they're buying, right? So for us, it's easy to evaluate them and actually give them credit. And since Redex is also connected with the same people, we can collect money next day as well, right? So the entire full stack of commerce is ShopUp, like three-part is Mocam, Redex, and Baki.
And when we were building that Redex infrastructure for Mocam, it made sense for us to also open it up to third parties, like, for example, Daraz or any e-commerce merchant. So not only does Redex only work for Mocam, but it's also open to third parties like any e-commerce or even any manufacturers who would want to move their goods to be plugged into the Redex network.
And how many SKUs does Mocam have now?
So it should be roughly around 10,000. Yeah.
And it's also perishables as well as
Correct.
durables or dry goods and other things as well.
Yeah.
Got it. Interesting. And is it correct? You have 500,000 retailers now in the network, or is that more? Or
That sounds like correct. Yeah.
So across all the platforms would probably have that. So it's not necessarily that one retailer would use all three platforms. One merchant may only be using Redex to deliver their e-commerce goods, whereas one retailer is not using Baki, he's only using Mocam to source their goods. So it's not necessarily that one person would use all three, but it would, some of them would probably do that, and it would make sense.
and curious, when you at this level of scale, right? And obviously these three products working together, what becomes your North Star metric that you kind of try to push everything toward?
I think revenue at this point, right?
So yes, obviously the revenue is obviously a very tangible metric, but I think once again that iron triangle itself, right? Like trying to make sure all these three fit into that flywheel, and each has their own ambition, right? But eventually we want to be the, as Ata said, that distributed across the country where anyone can plug in and have that access to any market in Bangladesh that they want.
So you had tremendous growth during the pandemic, going into 2020. In 2021, you raised, once again, you keep making milestones that move the market, $100 million plus Series B, and then I know there's been an extension this year as well. What metrics did you have to show to investors in a Series B that might be different or in addition to a Series A?
So I think Series B was probably personally the most intense part of my life, closing that particular round. But for example, a lot of the things that we initially started with was ambition, right? Like for example, any founder, if you go to any investor right now and you tell them about your ambition, like I want to reach here, I want to go there. During Series B, I think you have to show traction. You have to show numbers that enable that ambition, right? You can't just say that I will go there. You have to show that pathway. So that is one of the things that we had to focus a lot on, is showing how we will reach there. At the seed stage or a pre-series A stage, we could say a lot of things that we would want to be, and a lot of the things would still be theoretical. During Series B, they had to be practical. So we couldn't just go in there and say, we'll do this and we'll do this. We had to show what we were doing at that time and how that would translate into what we were doing next, and it had to follow a practical way. So, for example, even like for example, our financial services part, uh, even though we had a lot of ambitions to do next with it and whatever it is, we had to show traction. We had to show tangibility that this is what we're doing, this is working, and this is how we're going to the next
So
stage.
to give example, so it's not like all of the categories and everything needs to be 100% perfect, but there needs to be some proof in some category, right? That we have done well in this particular category, or maybe combining this one or two category, we reach to certain number, and we can say like we can follow exactly same strategy for the other categories as well, right? So some proof, and obviously the growth numbers, growth with proof probably.
So growth is a must, right? That's why maybe I don't mention that as often, but it's a must when you're raising at that level, that you have to show that you have had growth, not just the concept, but you also had growth. And yeah, I think at the same time, another thing that I would also like to mention is more confidence on the TAM. So up until that time, we were able to show secondhand data, research, what the TAM is, what this is, and what that is. But I think we also even went to the point of getting researchers on board to do independent market research to show potential investors how much actually the market is worth and what the size is and stuff like that. So I think conviction on the TAM is necessary for anyone who's looking at Bangladesh for the first time.
I remember just reading through those press clippings, some of the numbers that stand out. So 4.5 million retailers keeps coming up. 97%, or they power 97% of the retail economy. So, you see the vision. That's quite clear. 13x growth in revenue, 11x growth in shipments. What you're saying, it comes out also even in some things like the press clippings. My last question I have on this is going from, say, all the way from startup, seed, Series A, B. How have your roles evolved as founders and the first, I guess, being part of the company?
Yeah. So fundamentally, I think it's the same. I would say, for me, it's like at one point, at every point, like like what's the critical blocker in your company, right? As a founder, my job is to like figure that out, and that still is same. I think what really changed is mostly probably the execution part. I think up until 2019 I would be coding every day. Now I don't code, so that's probably the change. But on the other hand, and I think with experience, let's say the importance of hiring and focusing more on hiring, I think that has one probably big change. Like I try to spend a lot of my time in hiring now, and I think hiring and removing blockers for everybody else. That's probably the fundamental two things.
Yeah. So just one thing to add, all my life, from all the startups that I've done, I've always played the role of a CFO. So recently we have onboarded a CFO, and I finally am no longer the most hated guy in the office. So I right now focus on other things, which is basically once again, clearing blockers, right? So that's the fundamentally the only thing that I think founders should do is clear blockers and have that vision embedded into the company as to what we're doing, where we're going.
The first part, the setting up the vision as well. Yeah. So let's say Afif would be setting up, let's say, vision for the company, but you need to have that vision converted for the other teams as well, right? So to empower other teams, enable that vision is one of the key part of founders, so that everybody kind of works like a founder.
The best thing about the best case that you can have as a founder is to have other founders within the company. So if that happens, I think life becomes very easy.
Thank you for that. I think we should then take another step back and maybe go back now. So, okay, we're at the growth phase and the next phases. We'll finish with what's next, but Any questions so far based on what's happened? Lots of questions. So maybe we start from here. Nafalbhai, if you want to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Nafal Wahid, ex-Bikash, led Bikash's push into digital savings and loans. So I've got just out of curiosity, a few questions about the loans business. How much are you dispersing monthly? What's the NPL so far? And I mean, does the loan unit economics work for you with a 9% cap?
It does work for us, but I think we'd probably get into more details. Maybe we can catch up and get more details into the numbers itself. But once again, we have had like 8, 9 iterations to come to where we are at right now. It always didn't make sense, the unit economics, but eventually I think where we are at right now, it makes sense where we are not just able to use equity, but also use debt to make this work.
Bank finance, you mean?
Even external finance. So you can, if that works, then the unit economics, you have conviction that the unit economics works. So I think we are at that stage.
I should add, Nafalbhai has left Bcash. So you're not.
Ex-Bikash.
Yes, he has left Bcash. He's now doing his own startup, right? So no worries. Thanks a lot. Alvi, you had a question.
Thank you. Hello, this is Alvi from Beamify. So I had a question. I think Ataur was touching on it. It is like, how did the strategy of ShopUp, evolve from the days in the beginning and right now, currently? And to add to it, how did different, different co-founders add to that strategy? Like when it started and right now. I just want a perspective of it since.
Yeah, so I think two fundamental things. One is definitely, so now when we think, it's what customer wants, and second, the TAM. So if, like we, at this stage, like I think when we are starting, any TAM would probably work. Whatever customer wants, if we can build a product, you can probably figure out adjacent product and work on a TAM that will work eventually. But like when we pivoted from one product to another product, that always played a crucial part. Like, is this my customer wants from us right now? And secondly, if we do that, will that expand our TAM, right? So that fundamentally probably helped us to strategize where to go next and what to do next. Yeah.
And also I'd like to add to that is a lot of it is just working backwards. Right? So for example, we identify that the problem that the merchant is facing, and then a lot of the cases, even like the loan services that we have, is working backwards from that. They are having a problem with working capital, we work backwards from that. So how do we give that? They're having problem with logistics, we work backward from that, and that's how Redx came across. So I think we started obviously with that commerce platform idea, but a lot of these services that we have right now is us trying to solve problems that came up with it. And which are the problems that we want to solve? As Ada said, I think is something that adds to our TAM as well. So I think that's something that adds value to the merchant and adds to our TAM. I think that's kind of helped us make those decisions.
Okay, I think that is done. For the second part of that question, I mentioned like how does other departments or other co-founders they have their own separate lines right now, I suppose. So how do they collaborate on the master strategy that you have for the company?
So, do you mean other co-founders in ShopUp, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, what we have right now is I think what we would call a leadership team that needs to be aligned, right? Like for example, Ata is tech background, right? And he initially was only doing tech. I have a more of a finance background. Initially, I was only doing finance, but in the very early stages, specified roles for founders make sense, but immediately after, or even during that time, that alignment of the founders on strategy is very necessary. And one of the values that we have in the company is basically disagree but commit. So even if you don't agree to something, you still need to commit to it. So I think that also helped the leadership team have that one vision of where even if you're not completely on board with the strategy, if you have agreed to it, you need to commit to it. So I think that builds a lot of cohesion within the leadership team as well. And right now, the leadership team is not just the founders. I think we also have non-founders as part of the leadership team as well, and it's very important. Yeah, exactly. And it's very important to have them part of the alignment as well.
Yeah, I think in early stage, it's very important to have those specific roles. If everybody is doing everything, nothing would be getting done, right? So for me, like I never questioned, let's say, what's the strategy or what's the GTM, right? Back then, my job was to get product as soon as possible. I would be doing. Now I ask a lot of questions, but back then I did not, and it was very important and crucial for us to get products really fast. Like again, I would say like think weeks, like in terms of getting products in the market.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Mehdi bhai had a question, then Zunad bhai.
Thank you. My name is Mehdi Sharan. I'm the co-founder of HelloTask. We are building a job-seeking platform for blue-collar workers. I actually have two questions. First one is regarding Mocam. So mostly small retailers actually use this Mocam application, and they don't have the literacy level on technology. How you guys are solving that, and is this still an issue for you? And second one is actually pivoting. In the idea phase, you pivoted. I think for 2 or 3 times, but you are currently in the growth stage. Do you think you're going to pivot again if you see the more bigger picture? So how do you answer that? Thank you.
Sure. So I think the first part regarding that is there's always two parts of it. One is the self-service part where the Mocam retailers, obviously they themselves order, but then there's also the part where we have SRs in the market who is going to be helping them place the orders. So in many cases, you're right, so they might not have that, they're using feature phones, right? And they might not have that app level. But we have SRs in the field who will enable them to place those orders. So having just a very rigid outline that only self-service Mocam's retailers will service, I think also is not very helpful. So we also have to have managed solutions for them as well, where they are not able to place those orders. We have SRs in the fields who will be able to do that for them.
Just to add to that, so the product is not the interface, right? So for the Mocam product is the distribution channel. So the eventually the self-service and all of these things will happen, and we have a dedicated team who is working on this problem day and night, how to make interfaces easier for them and actually make it possible. But the core product here is the distribution network, right? So we need to understand which problem to solve first.
Yeah, actually on that, as most of the retailers use feature phone, so was it a concern for you that it could take a lot of time to turn into smartphone using audience? So what are the solution for the retailers who actually use feature phone?
So I think as Ata said, I think the solution wasn't for them to use feature phones. What we were solving for is the distribution channel. That is what we were trying to make.
Correct.
Right?
So the problem statement is they need products at one go within a cut of time from one source. That's the problem we are trying to solve.
Okay.
But to add to that, like that is also comes up in every investment calls and all, like what's the plan? So I'll give one example. Like when we started Redex, even for us, 90% of our merchants would not be creating parcels on the platform. So they will give Excel files to our camps, or they would be giving pictures of their parcels and ask us to upload that in the platform. So from there, now almost 95 to 99% of the merchants actually uploads their parcel, tracks their parcel, and currently about 50% of the issue are getting resolved within the platform. They don't have to call or actually go to chat. right? For Redx, that transition has happened. So the Mocam one, it's not about basically how, it's probably when. So that will happen, but internally, currently our product is the distribution network itself. It's not the interface, but we are working on it.
Because the interface could change. Yeah. But curious, part of that is, did you ever think about having like an IVR system, like a voice-based system to take orders, or did you try those things?
So yeah, we did try basically customer support. So multiple things still are going on. Call is one thing. We have one app where basically they can write. So it sounds funny, like retailers actually likes to write in the mobile app. So they would be writing, let's say, chal, and chal products would be coming in. The interface is completely tuned for that. So we're still experimenting, but on the other hand, the best channel still is the SR channel. I think we once the distribution part is figured out, the sourcing part is figured out probably all over the country, the transition I don't think would be that difficult.
Keep moving. Junaid Bhai, go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Zunad Rabbani. I'm a member of Bangladesh Angels Network. We understand that fundraising can be very difficult, but then spending money could be difficult too if you follow due diligence, especially when you have $20 million, $100 million. And this is a question specific to Shaheen Siam. How did you ensure that money is not wasted? And as a team, it could be you, it could be the entire leadership team. How do you ensure that all of a sudden you're given $100 million to achieve this? What's the process like?
Sure. So let me start with saying a few things. For example, a lot of the times, this is like a few years back, I would meet founders and they would be nervous because they only have 3 months runway left and they're going out and getting the next round ready, right? Or 4 months runway left and getting the next round ready. Why that did not resonate with us is because we always had a plan. So we always had a plan of what the next step would be. For example, when we raise money, obviously that use of funds and use of proceeds is earmarked, right? Like this goes behind CapEx, this goes behind burn, and this is our runway. So suddenly Afif comes up with an idea that I want to do this, which was not part of the original fundraising. And you can say no, right? Because it has to be done. But the idea is, how do you manage that fund, right? We can even look at raising convertible notes separately to manage that fund without eating the runway. The idea is that you have to earmark your funds as to how you use them. If that was not part of the reason why you raised that round, you'll have to look at how to get money for that, just to do that additional business experiment or whatever it is, and not eat into your runway. Even if it's eat into your runway on day one, you will have to have a plan of how to replenish this by day 3. So doing things without a plan, I think is risky. And obviously, a lot of the cases when startups take these risky decisions, it's not always on the fly, right? You have to have a plan as to how this will pan out. So once again, I have 6 months of runway, example, I have 6 months of runway left. Suddenly there's an opportunity where you need to invest $10 million and that opens up another area for you. And this is the right time to do it. You don't want to let go of the opportunity. Do not eat into your runway to finance that, but rather have another financing option open where you raise convertible notes, you raise another extension round, or you do something so that that has its value of its own and is not leaving you in a position where you suddenly have 2 months of runway left. So I think financial planning is sometimes often overlooked at the early stages. And even if you look at ShopUp from the outside, you might think a lot of decisions are being taken on the fly, on the go. But that I think we were lucky in the sense that we always had a plan. And if something came up that was not part of the plan, we had to accommodate it in the plan in such a way that it does not deviate from the original plan. So I think that part of diligence is very helpful. And uh, I would, I had a lot of pushback on this. Obviously, I was the bad guy where I had to say a lot no to a lot of stuff, but I can never say no, right? So I have to make it happen. So you have to make it happen, but at the same time, not deviate from your original plan. I think that's what's important here.
So just going to add one thing. When he says plan, the fundraising plan is also very important. So I think when we were doing seed, we already had funnels, like how would we convert these investors to our Series A. Same thing for Series B as well. Like we have onboarded Chinese investment bank, and Series C as well. They already have a plan. When we were discussing right before this meeting what we are going to do, right? So it's probably not going to come soon, but we already have strategies in place that that we will execute, right?
That gentleman, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Ashraf from Durjoy DSS. We work with retail and FMCG distribution. So, sorry about that. So I have a question that at one point, as a founder or as a leading team member, when you stop to pursue a solution and iterate to another one?
What's the time, right? So it's a very difficult question, right? So so if everyone knew that, then I think that's the ultimate signal that you can have, right? When to stop and when to iterate. So
So your customer, so you would kind of know from metrics itself, right? So whether your customers are really converting or they are retained or not, right? So I think this would be a basic like numbers problem. You should be able to understand from numbers, like when to not work on a particular problem. But I understand, like from founder perspective, there are products we have continued to kind of run for years because we have certain affection. But we already know, but we were doing some other thing on top of that because that particular thing is not working, and we know that.
True. So what happens in this case is we always look forward that there might be, let's see it for one more month, let's see it for 2 more months, and this might work once again.
Yeah, I think first version of ShopUp, we did that. We have had that learning. Like every week, we'd be launching some new feature and thinking that more customers would be coming, but that never happened. The first thing is basically one feature that you think that your customer will be coming. If that feature you can sell, then you know that PMF has been achieved, right? Otherwise, move on.
Thanks a lot.
I think we got time for maybe a couple more. I think Jawad had raised his hand before. Go ahead.
So this is Jawad from Bangladesh Angels. I think it's a question for both of you. Like in terms of going from seed to Series A to Series B, right? How did your expectation as a founder change for your team, and how did you manage expectations from your board, from your investors and stakeholders, right? What were you doing personally?
So I think there comes a point when you're scaling, when you realize that maybe you're not in control of everything, right? Like when you're a very small founder, you're controlling everything that's happening in the company. And when you realize that you cannot control everything that's happening in the company, then you realize that you'll need to have people who are doing that for you. So I think that was one of the things that happened in our case, is getting those leaders on board, getting that second layer, third layer, or whatever it is. I think that leader who is going to be managing those is very different from maybe an executioner, right? A very seed level person who is going to be like running and executing stuff may not necessarily be the person who's going to manage an entire team. So having that layer on board where you realize that they will be running the company and not you, right? Like for example, even if me and Ata are here doing all this and the company is still running, right? Because we have that leadership team on board, I think that was a very important change in how we work as founders, where you realize that a lot of time is going behind getting that leadership team ready, leadership team aligned, leadership team uh, focused on doing that job, rather you going into the nitty-gritty and doing it yourself. So this is the part where we talked about having that vision across the company, where right now we are managing more of the vision and the strategy itself, rather than just Ata coding or me doing like the nitty-gritty part of it. So that's one change that happened. And regarding the board, once again, going back to it, is like where right now every board meeting needs to be 100% tangible. We cannot talk about things that are like ambitions and things that are like, for example, with no proof of concept or anything that we do. So it has become more number centric than what we used to do in the earlier stages, right? So we show more data than we used to. We are talking in numbers rather than more on the North Star and stuff like that. But apart from that, I think right now what we are doing is focusing on other things as well. Initially, during the board meetings, we were only focusing on things like how to make the business grow. But right now, we are also focusing things on like how, let's say, the HR part of it as well. So what are we doing in terms of retention of the employees? What are we doing in those cases and stuff like that? So these things come up during the growth stage, and these were not talked about during the early stages. The board did not want to know them. They just wanted to know how are you going to grow. That question is still there, how are you going to grow, but also what the other aspects of making that team as well, right?
I think, Rosie, I had a question. Rosie, if you want to.
Hi, I'm Rosina. I'm the CEO of Aurora. It's a medicine delivery business. Been really great hearing you both speak and feeling a little bit inspired, so that's wonderful. My question is around fundraising and seed and pre-series A or Series A or whatever you want to call it. Do you wish you could do anything differently? And then a second question is, I heard you talk a lot about being bold, making quick decisions and execution. What have you done when being bold has actually failed?
So there are a
Yeah,
lot of
things.
lot of
like-
things that failed.
like-
Other than cry.
Like, I think every year there would probably be 2-3 colossal mistakes that we have done that did not work out. But the key thing is to move on super fast and actually doing the next thing, right? And now that we are in a certain stage, we can do parallel things as well, right? We can run parallel experiments, which probably was not possible.
That part that he said, that it's going to fail, but we really have to move on from that really fast. I think the more we dwell on the failures, it takes up a lot of bandwidth for us. I think that we have already talked about the successes, but they're like massive failures as well. So yeah, so maybe that will take like a 2-day long session to talk about our failures. So yeah, definitely better. But what was the first question?
So just around when you did your seed and pre-Series A or Series A, is there anything that you'd want to change if you could turn back time?
Personally, no, right? For example, yes, sometimes you would think that maybe if that didn't happen, maybe like that person was difficult or that thing maybe was not happening. But everything kind of led to where we are right now. And I don't know how changing that would have changed where we are at right now and where we're going. So personally, I don't think I would have changed everything, because each one of those things had a learning. And I think that's what built where we are at right now. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who want to grab some food, maybe take prayers and everything else. So I think we'll wrap up now. But I will finish with this one question to both of you, because you're in this really interesting phase of your professional lives as well, because you're becoming now angel investors. You're spending more time in sessions like this, mentoring entrepreneurs who want to get to where you are. What's been kind of the experience so far? What are some kind of common mistakes you see founders doing, and how, for you guys as well, how do you see yourself getting involved in the ecosystem going forward?
So, yeah, I think, yes, there are a lot of learnings that I myself have been able to implement towards founders that are rising right now. But I think one of the things that that really stands out is how they approach to solve the problem. So, for example, let me talk about two statements. One statement is where a founder says that I want to be this of Bangladesh, where they have like this, I want to be this of Bangladesh. And the other founder is saying, I'm solving this problem of Bangladesh. So one of them is working backwards. One of them has identified a problem and then worked backwards to solve that problem. The other founder is thinking of how to go there, where they're not necessarily sure if that's a problem to solve or not. It doesn't necessarily mean that the first person would not be able to do that and have a successful startup, but I think it's more tangible to have that working backwards mindset and trying to solve a problem rather than having an ambition of becoming this of Bangladesh. So I think that kind of helps identify a little bit more about unsuccessful founders and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'll probably go more on execution side. I think one of the key, so we already spoke about making mistakes and iterating faster, but I'd say one of the key thing probably is to maintain the rigor, right? So you will face a lot of difficulties, but few things are very important. For example, for engineering team, like having that daily stand-up, right? Or for sales team, like the sales call in the morning, right? Like these things are very important. It seems like very small, but when you have figured out, like if your entire company has these units figured out, right? The sales team is doing that sales call in the morning, and engineers are doing that stand-up, and you have that report every day. Also, you are evaluating the weekly numbers, and you are present there and seeing these numbers every week and pushing for the changes and asking from team, let's say, what more can you bring, right? So I see like that's very important. Like it's what makes your employees or your team kind of connected with your vision, and you see and you maintain the rigor in the team that and you make sure that execution is being done. Like the funding story of Afif, like it's the execution every day is very important, and for years.
Excellent. Shaheen Bhai, Ataur Bhai, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming and joining us at our offices. Yeah.